Hello, this is Mike Kent, Professor of Computer Information Technology at San Jacinto College on the Central Campus. Today, I want to be recording a lecture for my ITSC 1321 class, Chapter 19, Supporting Printers and Customizing Systems. The emphasis on this chapter, however, what I'm going to emphasize is the printer stuff. All right, so let's jump in. So, objectives are discuss printer types and features, installing and managing printers, what is routine maintenance we can do on printers, how can we troubleshoot printers, and customize systems for customer need. Major categories of printers is laser printers. That's what you're going to see mostly in industry. Inkjet printers, that's mostly what you're going to see at home. Thermal printers for niche and impact printers when you need. Usually you see impact printers for multiple copies because you actually have pins hitting a piece of paper through a basically a typewriter ribbon. And that striking will let you do multi-part forms, carbonless multi-copy forms. Laser printers. So laser printer technology is exactly like copy machine technology. What we do is we put toner, which is the ink, it's a dust, it's a lot of times a plasticized dust of a color onto a rotating drum, which is pressed onto a piece of paper, and then the ink is melted on, baked onto the piece of paper. These print an entire page at one time. So let's talk, and you need to know the 7 steps in laser printing. This is on the A+ certification. So first step is just the processing of the image. The raw data is transferred to the printer through a USB connection or a network connection or a wireless network connection. Okay. So the bitmap of what dots need to be turned on the printer at the resolution of the printer, a lot of laser printers are like 1200 dots per inch. Then the next step after processing the image is to condition the drum to negative 600 volts. Okay. Then we write the image onto the drum, and as the laser is striking the drum, it changes the voltage from negative 600 volts to negative 100 volts on the drum surface. Okay. And there's a little electronically controlled mirror that is shining the laser onto the drum. At the speed the drum is turning, it can do an entire page. It can draw an entire page onto that drum. So developing, then we transfer toner, we sprinkle toner onto the drum, but the toner only sticks to the areas that have the negative 100 volts area of the drum. So now we have the image we want on the drum, but we need to transfer it to the piece of paper. So now a piece of paper is introduced and pushed up against the drum once around, get the whole page, and the static electricity properties of how the laser printer is set up is the toner sticks to the paper instead of the drum. Now, at this point, it's just on the paper, held on by static electricity. If you've ever pulled a piece of paper out of a copy machine or a laser printer that is jammed, that's where the ink smears, okay? Because it has not been fused onto the piece of paper yet. So then the next step is a piece of paper goes through a fuser, which heats the paper up enough to melt the toner, to fuse the toner onto the paper. So that's why paper that comes out of a laser printer is quite warm. Finally, you've got a little whisk that cleans the remaining residual toner and charge off of the drum, and then it's rinse and repeat. We go back to receiving the next page of information, conditioning that bit, conditioning the drum, and this can happen as many pages per minute as the printer can do. So if you have a printer that can do 60 pages per minute, it's doing this process 60 times per minute. So how do we get color on a laser printer? Color laser printer literally has 4 separate drums. You have a black and white drum, and then it's not RGB, and they call it like cyan, magenta, and yellow. I think that's what they call them, the other 3 drums. So you actually go through the laser printing process 4 times, and the paper is pressed up against 4 different drums, and you have 4 different toner cartridges of those colors to write that each color onto the piece of paper. And then once you have all 4 images for the different colors on the paper, then it goes through the fuser and it's melted on. So make sure you know the 7 steps of the laser printing process, and make sure you understand that color laser printers do the exact same process for black and white and then the 3 major colors. Like I said, I believe it's cyan, magenta, and yellow. At least that's what you see on HP. I assume many of the others it's the same. And it puts those colors, all 4 of those colors, on the piece of paper, and then it melts them on in the fusing process. So laser printers, of course, they have different parts for the laser, exposing, developing, and cleaning. They get the most wear. The toner cartridges uh, just run out of ink after so many pages, run out of toner. And one of the big things you want to look at when you're buying a laser printer is how much do the toner cartridges cost, and how many pages do you get out of the toner cartridges. In general, laser printers are cheaper to operate than inkjet printers. The cost per page of operating the printer is drastically lower, but there are home laser printers that are significantly more expensive than inkjet printers. So you really have to do your homework and look at the cost per page of black and white and the cost of page per color. Now, in my lab at the college, I have some really old printers. I have HP 4100, and the toner cartridge, it's a black and white only printer, and it does about 10,000 pages with the toner cartridge that cost about $80. It's extremely cheap to operate that printer. Now, I also have some HP, also by Hewlett Packard, 3800 laser printers. These are color, and they're much worse for the cost of operating. First of all, they have 4 toner cartridges. Unfortunately, each toner cartridge only seems to have about a 2,500 page capacity, and for that 2,500 pages, it costs about $200 to get a toner cartridge. So if you have to replace all 4 toner cartridges, you're looking at $800. And this is for a printer that probably cost $1,200. So you can see why I want to hang on to the old HP 4100s, because they're just so cheap to operate and they're so reliable. Now, I had an HP 4300 that had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies run through it, and it finally got where it was just jamming too much and that a maintenance kit would not solve the problem. That cartridge did 20,000 pages and cost about $120, so it was even cheaper to operate. So every so many thousands of pages, 100,000 pages, a laser printer has to have certain parts replaced. There's a pickup roller that will get slick. There is a separation pad that keeps it from pulling more than one piece of paper out of the tray, and then there's rubber rollers. You can get a maintenance kit for a laser printer for about 50 bucks, and you replace the rubber rollers, the pickup roller, and the separation pad, and then it's good for another 100,000 pages. All right, more terminology. Duplex printer. It can print on both sides of the paper, okay? Duplex printers are just, they can print double-sided. That's the thing you need to know. Inkjet printers. Second most popular type of printer, and you see this in home use. It uses a water-based ink, and it uses some sort of heating system or pressurized system to spray the ink onto the paper in very fine dots. So we can either do this by basically boiling it, so water boils and it turns to steam and that expels the ink, or I don't know what other methods. So you're basically doing one line of text with the print head each pass, so it's going to print a lot slower than a laser printer, which is doing an entire page at once. So the ink is applied to the paper using a matrix of small dots. They should be close enough together, 600 dots per inch, 1200 dots per inch, that you can't see them. Okay. Different types of inkjet printers use different technologies to get the ink onto the paper. Different printers use different methods to deal with the print heads staying clean. So most common I've seen is the cartridge for the color, for the black and white, and then you have a color cartridge which has 3 reservoirs of 3 different inks, has the print head on it, so that if you have a printer that's been sitting around for a long time and some ink has dried in the print jets and they're no good anymore, when you replace the cartridges, you replace the print heads and then you're back into business. The head is moved by stepper motors. They have plastic gears. They have little rubber belts. These are going to wear out over time. You know, you're talking a $50 printer. There is really no repairing an inkjet printer. You dispose of it. Some inkjet printers have duplex printing. It's just a feature you're going to pay more money for. The most recent trend I've seen in printers is what Epson's done with their EcoTank printers. These are inkjet printers, but instead of having a removable cartridge, you have tanks. You have 4 separate tanks for the black and white and the 3 primary colors, and you just refill them with an ink bottle. Now, the scam, the business model for printers, inkjet printers used to be basically give the printer away very cheap and make your money on print cartridges. So typically you might see that the replacement black and white cartridge and the replacement color cartridge are $30 each. That's $60. You bought the printer for $50. So there was a time when people would actually buy a new printer because it was cheaper to get the new cartridges that came with the printer. But then the printer companies got smart. They started giving you starter cartridges that were not fully filled with ink, so that you didn't get a full cartridge. And you couldn't just fill the cartridge up and use it, because what they do is they put an RFID tag on the print cartridge with a serial number, and when you put that cartridge into the printer, it notes the serial number of that cartridge and counts pages. And once you've done 1,500 pages from this cartridge, or 800 pages, or 1,000, or whatever the magic number is, it declares that cartridge empty, whether it's empty or not, and it will not use that cartridge anymore on the printer, even if you fill it up. If you look at refill kits on Amazon for printers, for inkjet printers, they will sell you the bottles of ink and the hardware you need to refill the cartridges, and they sell you new RFID tags, so you have to pry the old tag off the printer cartridge and put the new one on so it has a different serial number, even though it's the same cartridge. So it's the Gillette razor blade model. Gillette, 100 years ago, came out with a safety razor. he would give the razor away for free and sell you the razor blades, because once you had his razor and you bought into using his razor, you could only buy the razor blades from him because he had a patent on it. So printer companies are starting to move away from that because with smartphones and PDFs and everything else on your mobile devices, people are not printing like they used to. I remember when I used to need to take a trip and find a hotel in Dallas, downtown Dallas or somewhere, I would go to MapQuest and print out the trip notes, the directions, so I would know where to turn through the maze-like freeway system in Dallas so I could arrive at my hotel. Now, of course, we don't do that. We use Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever our map app is on our phone. So one of the major reasons I used to have to print stuff out has gone away. I used to have to print stuff out so I could fax it to a doctor's office or to somewhere. Well, who faxes anything anymore? That's like sending Indian smoke signals. It's ancient technology from 30 years ago. So now we email an attachment, or we have some sort of secure portal where we can upload a document. But anyway, when you're buying a printer, look at the cost of the ink cartridges refills or the toner cartridges and see how many pages you're getting. Well, I bought an EcoTank printer for my house simply because it would go years before I had to put ink in it. The printer I have now is 2 years old, and I finally had to put a bottle of black ink in the printer. In fact, people were buying ink so rarely for this printer that Best Buy doesn't carry the ink. You cannot go into the store and buy it. You have to order it online. So that's a pretty good omen that Best Buy isn't making money off selling ink on that printer. They don't stock it because it sits around too long. So, and I had some trouble finding the ink bottle for this printer. And that's a good thing, because I can't tell you the number of times my wife was having to print something out for her kindergarten class, and she thought she had an extra print cartridge. She was going to print. The printer ran out of ink. She didn't have a cartridge. It would cause frustration. It's 8 o'clock at night. I would offer to go to Walmart. She didn't want me to go out to Walmart in the middle of the night, etc., etc. So a whole set of frustrations that we used to have, having our printer run out of ink at the wrong time, just went away because I bought a printer that can do 5,000 pages, and 5,000 pages is a lot of pages for a home printer before you got to buy some ink. And then I went and bought a $10 bottle of ink, so the refill was very, very cheap, and it would have been cheaper if I bought it online. All right, so just remember, inkjet printers use 2 or 4 cartridges. If it's 2 cartridges, they have a black and white cartridge and a combined color cartridge. If it's 4 cartridges, then you have a black and white, and then you have cyan, magenta, and yellow, or whatever they call them. Impact printers, dot matrix printers, that's what we used to have in the 80s, and that was all you could get, and it was loud, and it was slow, and it could print black and white. And it was not quote unquote letter quality. You could see the dots on the paper. So dot matrix printers are still used in situations where you need to print multiple copies of something at once. So like, I think if you go into O'Reilly Auto Parts, they use a dot matrix printer to print out your receipt. They keep one copy and you get one copy. So it's an impact printer. So it pushes the pins against a cloth ribbon that has ink on it and puts the ink on the paper like a typewriter ribbon. And typically dot matrix printers use a tractor feed. You can Google that, where it has feeds on each side of the paper that you have to tear off just to get the regular piece of paper. So you can use it with carbon paper to get multiple copies. Very, very durable. The printers last forever. They're tanks. About all you have to do is re-ink the uh, the ribbon or buy a new ribbon. Impact printers, if you run them for a long time, they can get quite hot because they're using an electromagnetic servo to move the pins in and out. I haven't really seen that as a problem. Thermal printers, if you get gas from the gas station, that's a thermal printer. It's a special type of paper that is heat sensitive, and rather than having dot matrix that hit the paper, it has little dots that heat up to change the color of the paper to black instead of white. I remember when cars used to have cigarette lighters, you could heat up your cigarette lighter in the car and put it up against the thermal paper and you'd get a black circle because it is heat sensitive. Or if you left your receipt on the dashboard of the car, the sun's heat in summer would turn the whole thing black and you couldn't read it anymore. So thermal printers, you see them in niche applications. The biggest one I can think of is a gas station pump. So how do we hook up a printer? If it's a local printer, we usually hook it up by USB. And if it's a Wi-Fi printer, which they all are, you usually start out by hooking it up USB, installing the software on the computer first of all, before you hook the printer up. Then you hook the printer up USB. Then it communicates the wireless settings to the printer so it knows what your SSID is and your password is. Then you can unhook the USB cable, okay? And it works. A network printer has a direct Ethernet port on it or Wi-Fi. Corporate level printers are going to have a RJ45 network jack that plugs into them. There's just nothing more reliable than a physical network connection versus dealing with wireless shenanigans. So that's the two ways we go. We either go USB or we go Wi-Fi or hardwired network. You're not going to see serial port printers anymore. Serial port is obsolete. But like I said, wired, we could have USB or an Ethernet cable. Haven't really seen any Bluetooth printers, but I usually see Wi-Fi where it can create an ad hoc Wi-Fi network, or it can just connect to your wireless access point. That's usually what I see. Once it's connected to your wireless access point, any computer on your network, there is a discovery mechanism with Windows 10 where it can find the printer and install the proper driver. So when you're getting the print driver, of course, just make sure you're getting the 64-bit version or the 32-bit version, whichever you need. So it'll either be software that came on a CD or DVD that came with the printer or something you can download. How can we share the printer? We can actually use the home group and right-click on the printer and share it out to other people, but you're printing to the printer through your computer. It's not being shared directly. Used to be a big deal in the past where you'd actually have a selector switch for one printer, so 3 different computers, but you'd have to physically throw the switch to let that computer print to it. And nowadays, if we have a Wi-Fi printer, everybody can print to it via the network, or if it's an Ethernet printer, you can print to it via the network. So, you know, on your home network, you want to make sure you've got the security settings right. Um, if you're sharing the printer through your computer, there's something called Wake on LAN. So if somebody needs to print, it will wake your computer up. But you just don't see this anymore. The printer's a Wi-Fi device. It's on your network. It's attached to your SSID wireless access point, and then everybody can see it and connect to it. If necessary, set the security. In a corporate environment, you're probably running a print server on one of your servers that prints to the printers, and who's allowed to connect to that print queue is determined by what group they're in and what rights they have. So it's not being done locally. And this may be a little out of date here. So once you have a printer on your network, and this is true for corporate printers, you can access the printer. The printer also happens, usually it is a little web server as well, so it can display its information. So let me pause the video here for a second and get out to a web browser. So I've got a web browser open, and I'm just going to type the IP address of my home printer. I usually do this when I do this at school. I type in the IP address of the lab printers, and anyway, when you go into your web browser and type in the IP address of the printer, you can see I have an ET2750 series, and I can look at its status. I can see how much ink I have. You see I refilled the black, the yellow's getting kind of low, the cyan's getting kind of low, the magenta's fine. I can look at all my settings. I can see if AirPrint is set up, which is Apple AirPrint, where I can print to the printer from my phone. It is. I've done this. I can check to see if there's a firmware update for the printer. And I can change Google Cloud Print Services. This is for Android or Chrome OS. I can set all this up. I can set up Epson, a service where I can print to this printer when I'm not at home. And I don't have that set up. But the big thing is I can come in here and check my ink capacities without having to be in the room. So once you know the printer's IP address, you can just go straight to the printer with your web browser. All right, let me get my PowerPoint back up. So that's what they mean by using File Explorer or Windows Explorer. I can use a web browser to get to it. Virtual printing, Microsoft Windows has the ability to print straight to PDF. That comes in handy if you need to save a record or something and you want to save it as a file. I do that a lot if I have to scan something to send to my flexible medical spending account to get reimbursed for a prescription I bought or a doctor's visit. I can print to a PDF from a web page to save a record of it and then upload it to my flexible spending account website because they insist on a receipt. You could save it as an XPS, which is a Microsoft file. I could print it as a bitmap or JPEG. It just depends. I use this a lot. I print to PDF just to save stuff that I need a record of it, but I don't need a paper record of it. Cloud printing lets you print to a printer from anywhere. Like I said, the Epson has that ability. Pretty much everybody has that ability nowadays, but you just want to think about if you want to allow that or not. If you go into the printer's property box, you can set it to print to black and white by default because color is much more expensive to print. You can manage features. You can manage duplexing, whether you want to print on the front and the back of the pages by default. You can set all these settings. Or you can do it per print job. If you bought the upgraded version of the printer, you may need to go into the print driver and tell it has a duplexer so it can print full duplex, because that may not be default. Extending the printer life. Especially with corporate laser printers, you're talking $1,500 or $2,000 or more high-end printer. You definitely, when the printer has problems, you're going to put a maintenance kit in it. You're going to do routine maintenance, and it's going to tell you after this many pages it needs maintenance. So other maintenance, I'll talk about this in a little bit. I'll show you. I'm going to direct you to some videos I want you to watch. But what else? We may need to update a device driver on the computer. We may need to put maintenance kits in the computer. There might be a firmware update for a security flaw in the printer's operating system that's running. So working inside of the printer uses a lot of strong electric charges. It has capacitors that hold power even when the computer's turned off. So you want to turn it off and unplug it. Um, what I would then do is once it's unplugged is turn the switch back on and leave it for a while to make sure those capacitors are drained. Of course, it's got a laser. You don't want a laser shining in your eye. It could hurt your eyes, so you don't want to be inside the printer when it's turned on. Use your anti-static protection. So installing a new cartridge is usually pretty darn easy. The toner cartridge, it usually has a plastic barrier inside the cartridge. So there's some plastic tabs outside the printer that you have to click and pull that plastic barrier out, and that releases the toner to get to the drum, which is part of the toner cartridge. And then you usually rotate the cartridge back and forth several times to distribute the toner evenly before you put it in the printer. It's a very simple process. You can find videos on it online. Very, very easy for a toner cartridge on a printer. You do not want to blow the printer out with compressed air because you don't want to inhale that toner. It's not organic. If you get it in your lungs, you've got little chunks of plastic in your lungs that your body's going to have trouble dealing with. If you're going to be cleaning it out, you need to get a toner certified vacuum cleaner. You can get an extension magnetic brush because the particles are magnetic. They will be affected by a magnetic and electric field. Usually when you put the toner cartridge in or an inkjet printer, it's going to go through a calibration, align to get the heads or the toner cartridge aligned properly so the different colors will print in the proper place. So laser printers do this automatically. And after you put in a new toner cartridge, it can be very annoyingly long. Like our HP 3800s in the lab, it takes like 5 minutes to calibrate the position of the toner cartridges so everything will print correctly. Inkjet printers have a cleaning process. They have a little sponge inside them that it wipes the head on to get any excess ink off of. If the head is not coming clean, you can use a Q-tip and some alcohol. Like on my Epson 2750, it has a clean cycle I can run it through, or it has a deep cleaning cycle. I had to run the deep cleaning cycle on it recently because I wasn't getting color out of the printer. So, printer maintenance kits. So, like I said, laser printers, you can buy a maintenance kit that's going to have the transfer roller, that's going to have the pad, the paper separation pad, and several rubber rollers. And these rubber rollers are kind of, they kind of have an alligator skin finish on them. They're rough, and that's to grab the paper. And after they've had tens of thousands of pages of paper go through them, those rollers get smooth, and that's when you start grabbing 2 pieces of paper at a time and you start getting jams. If you start getting jams, even after you've cleaned everything up and fixed the jam and it happens again and again, then you need to get a maintenance kit. Okay. Now, another thing that will die on a laser printer is that fuser. That's the little oven that heats the paper up enough to melt the toner ink onto the paper. The fusers are electrical. They will just burn out eventually. It's less than $100 to get a fuser. $50 or $75 for a fuser for a $1,500 printer, and then it's good for 200,000 more copies. So fusers are wear items. The image drum is usually part of the toner cartridge, so you don't have to worry about that. Really don't need any specialized tools. If it needs a specialized tool, that will come with a maintenance kit. Like usually there's a little plastic hook to help you get the transfer roller out, to pop it out. It's very easy to do. So let me show you a couple things I have on Blackboard in regards to printer maintenance kits. So if I jump into Blackboard and I go to Course Documents Labs, if we go down to the Printer Lab, I have the service manual for the HP 4000 and for the 5100, but I've got some videos. I want you to watch these videos. So here's a video on replacing the fuser in an HP 5100. You can see how simple it is. And then putting a maintenance kit in an HP 5100 is shown here in these two parts. So watch these videos. They're like 5 or 10 minute videos. And then how to do the same thing on an HP 4300. Watch this video. So go watch these videos, these 4 videos, to get an idea of what it takes to work on a printer. This is normally something we do in class. It's one of our printer labs, but it's very straightforward. If you get the service manual or you find a good video on it, you can do this. You just need to be aware that laser printers periodically are going to need a new set of rubber rollers, a transfer pad, and maybe a transfer roller. They all come with a maintenance kit. If the fuser dies, go buy yourself a fuser online and swap it out yourself. It's just not hard to do that. Upgrades to a printer. Some printers used to have a hard drive in them to store jobs on, so you could put a bigger magnetic hard drive in it. The other thing you can do is add more RAM to the printer. This is probably not upgradable anymore, but like some of my printers I have in the lab just take SO-DIMMs. They take laptop memory. So you just got to find out the right memory, open the printer up, get access to the circuit board, pop a new memory stick in. It's that easy. So then it will be able to print faster. Because sometimes with my old HP 4100, the print jobs are really high resolution and it cannot hold all the pages of the print job in the memory of the printer. So then the print server has to send page 1 to the printer. It prints page 1. Or it sends pages 1 through 3. It prints pages 1 through 3. 4 through 6. Prints pages 4 through 6. Then it goes back, has to send pages 1 through 3 to the printer again to print it again. So not having enough memory can slow down the print jobs just because the printer cannot hold the entire print job in its random access memory. So as you can see, there'd be a circuit board. You can add memory. Print servers and management tools. You can view the status of the printer. Utilities that come with your printer will let you look at the status. I already went here via IP address 190. This in my home on my private network. My printer is 2.105. Troubleshooting printers. Let's get into that. So there's a flow chart on the next slide. There's a flow chart in the book that talks about it, but what you're trying to determine is that the problem with the printer itself are the connectivity from the computer, the one computer, or is it a problem with the network? Okay. Or is it a problem with the application trying to use the printer? So you could start out and just go to the control panel of the printer itself and tell it to print a test page. If that's not working, you know it's a problem with the printer. You can go into control panel of your computer and tell it to print a test page to see if your computer is talking to the printer. You can go to another computer on your network and try to print, and then you can prove or disprove whether it's one computer or multiple computers. So you just want to go through this one step at a time, working from the printer back towards your computer to see where the problem is. You know, if you can't access the printer by its IP address in a web browser, then it's probably not on the network. So then you got to look into reestablishing that connection to the network. But if the printer will print locally from its control panel, then you know the printer's working. Then you can go into the control panels of the printer and see if it's connected to the network. So first, verify the printer's on, print a self-test page. If the test page is not printing, then you've got a problem locally with the printer and you've got to troubleshoot it there. If the test page will not print at all, Then you're going to have to look for obvious things. Is the toner cartridge empty? Is it not installed right? Is the printer currently jammed? Are you getting an error message on the display? See if you can run a self-test. Have you tried turning it off and on, etc., etc.? If the self-test page prints, but the Windows test page doesn't, then you're having a connectivity issue between that computer and the printer, and you're going to have to troubleshoot that. Check its IP address information. Try to bring the computer up in a web browser by the printer up in a web browser by its IP address. Shared printers, can you print it from the local computer but other people can't, then you got to make sure the sharing is set up right. When in doubt, you can delete the printer from your local computer and reinstall it. Sometimes you cannot print because there's a job hung up in the print queue. So you can go to the local print queue of your computer and delete all the jobs in the printer's queue, and then restart the print spooler service. And once again, you could delete the printer and reinstall it. Check for an updated driver, try to print a file, try it from safe mode. Poor quality print on a laser printer is make sure your toner cartridge isn't all the way, make sure it's not damaged. You might have it in economy mode, so it's printing at a lower quality by default. I haven't seen issues with the quality of paper. You might need to clean the printer out in general. Laser drum might need replacing, but like I said, on almost all laser printers, the drum is included in the toner cartridge. If you have an extra cartridge, you could swap it out and see if the problem goes away. Poor print quality from the laser printer. If the page has a gray background, the image drum is worn, or some of the electronics that's doing the conditioning of the drum could be bad, and that's going to be if you're looking at the print engine having problems on the printer, it's almost certainly not worth repairing. It's time to get a new printer. Replacing a toner cartridge can solve a lot of issues. Be careful where you buy your print cartridges from. You can get refilled print cartridges from third-party companies, and they can cause you issues. Make sure it's a reputable company. I'm sure there's plenty of third-party companies that are taking empty toner cartridges and cleaning them up and refilling them. HP does that. When you buy a toner cartridge from Hewlett Packard, they give you a mail label to put the cartridge back in the box it came from and mail the old cartridge back to them. So you kind of swap it out, and then they will recondition that cartridge and use it again. Poor print quality on an inkjet printer, it's usually you need to clean the print nozzle. If the nozzle is part of the cartridge and it won't clean, then you got to get a new inkjet cartridge. Inkjet printers have a sponge that wipes off the print head near the cartridge rest. That can get saturated with ink if it's an older printer. So it's water-based ink, so you can literally get a wet sponge and keep dabbing it on the sponge that's built into the printer until you get most of that ink out of it. Garbled characters on paper, that's usually a print job got corrupted or you have the wrong print driver. Low memory errors, if it's printing more slowly or if it gives you a memory overflow, you may need to drop the quality of your printer, your print job. This would be pretty rare, but you might need to go down to 600 dots per inch or 300 dots per inch or from 1200 because it's just trying to send too big of a job to the printer. Wrong print colors, that's usually because one of the colors is not printing. So it's usually a inkjet cartridge issue. For a laser printer, you're going to calibrate the printer. All right, last part of this chapter, customizing computer systems for users. So basically for power users, your average 4 gigabyte or 8 gigabyte memory machine is not going to cut it. Now, for just an office worker that needs Microsoft Office and internet access and maybe running some company apps, a basic computer would be very fine. But if you're looking at high end, if you're going to be doing computer aided design or computer aided manufacturing workstation, you're going to want a high end video card. You're going to want lots of RAM, 16 megabytes of RAM, 32, not megabytes, gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes, depending on what's recommended by that software. You want a powerful processor. You're talking Intel i7, i9. You're talking AMD, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9, or a Threadripper. You're talking, you can make a lot of difference with a computer by using a large solid state drive. You get the idea. For audio processing and video work, once again, you probably want a better video card, although that's not as much of an issue in video processing if you're editing videos. But you do want a fast multi-core processor for when you're rendering the videos, and more RAM is better. The more RAM you have, not so much a DVD burner anymore, because that's not the delivery method of videos anymore to DVD. One or more fast, large hard drives, video work, the files are very large, and you want to make sure you have enough storage to back them all up. Virtualization, once again, you want a multi-core processor and lots of extra RAM. If Windows runs best on 8 gigabytes and you want to run a virtual machine and run it well, then you want a multi-core processor with 6 cores, and you want to be able to give that virtual machine 8 gigabytes of RAM. You know, yes, you can run Windows 10 with 2 gigabytes of RAM, but it's not going to perform very well. You can run Windows 10 with a single core CPU, but it's not going to perform as well. So if you have an 8-core CPU, you could comfortably give your virtual machine 4 cores. And if you have 32 gigs of RAM, you could comfortably give the virtual machine 8 gigabytes of RAM to use. Gaming PCs, of course, they tend to be video card bound. So you want a good video card. You want good heat dissipation. Most games, they're not CPU bound. Most games will run 5 with like an Intel i5 or a Ryzen 5. You can spend a little bit more money, get into an i7 or a Ryzen 7. But where you get your bottleneck with gaming is the video card. Home theater PC, you don't see this as much anymore. Of course, you want HDMI, which they all have. You want a coax cable input. Cable TV input is really not going to do you much good, because the cable TV shows that are streamed to your cable TV box are encrypted, and they're not going to want to let your PC do the de-encryption. If it's from a TV antenna, like in Houston, there's 50 or 60 good TV channels off the air. That is unencrypted, uncompressed HD TV transmitted on the radio waves. So if you go buy yourself a good $40 outdoor RCA antenna and run a coax cable into your house, you will be able to have software on your computer, and you have a TV capture card that has that coaxial connector. It'll have the software to basically let your TV capture those shows, store those shows. It'll have like a cable guide showing you what shows are coming up, etc., etc. But for cable TV or satellite TV, you're not really going to get that into your PC because that stuff is encrypted. A home server PC, you could get something that has a bunch of storage on it, like a RAID array, and you have a bunch of storage. Like if you're doing video processing, you might want to have a network accessible storage, a NAS box. You can buy these for a couple $100 and populate it with hard drives. And then you're transferring data over the network at 1 gigabit, which is more than faster than a magnetic hard drive. Virtualization server. One trend you're seeing more of is you have thin clients for people's desks, and it basically has enough power to run remote desktop and connect to a virtual machine that's somewhere on your network, or a virtualization application server. So you're running you're running Microsoft Word, but it's not actually running on your computer. It's running on the virtualization client server. And they do this to save money because now instead of putting an $800 desktop on somebody's desk, you're putting a $200 thin client and you're virtualizing the applications. So the server is doing most of the processing. So in summary, the big emphasis in here is to pay attention to laser and inkjet printers. Make sure you've memorized the 7 steps of the laser printer. I'm warning you, that will be a matching question on the final exam. And know how inkjet printers work, dot matrix printers work, and thermal printers work in general. But the ones you need to concentrate on are laser and inkjet printers. So you can install a printer locally, you can install it on a server, and everybody connects to that printer via the server. That's typically how it's done in the corporate world. You could, if you have a printer installed locally, you could share it through your network, but nowadays most printers are directly on the network anyway. Check your print count, your page count on your printers to know when they need their maintenance and they need their maintenance kits so you can order them before you need them, but you probably don't want to order them and have them sit in a cabinet for 2 years so the rubber gets hard. Adding memory to a printer may make it perform better, but you're talking about a corporate printer, not your average Joe Blow home laser printer. And then we talked about customizing computers. And that brings us to the end. Now, don't forget, I want you to watch these videos. If you go to course documents, labs, look at lab 13 and watch these videos. They're not very long, but they'll show you what's involved in putting a maintenance kit or a fuse replacement in a printer. All right. Thanks a lot.